I have you here as Jerry Reynolds will be coming up in just a moment. Ryan in Sacktown as well. We've got lots to talk about on this Wednesday afternoon show.
Audio Jungle.
And it's great to have Jerry Reynolds with us. And Jerry, I want to start off on a sad note. We lost the captain yesterday, Willis Reed, gone at age 80. And you developed a nice friendship with him, didn't you? I enjoyed being around him for the short period of time he was in Sacramento. But I know you really had a lot of respect for him, didn't you?
Boy, just the best guy, and I'm probably like you at first. I remember him first as a player, obviously a great player.
Yep.
But getting a chance to work with Willis and then, stayed in touch with him pretty close for a number of years after that. But that, it was really one of the highlights of my life, to be around so many times your heroes fall short.
Mm-hmm.
You get around, when you find out that they're flawed people. Well, Willis, I don't think had any flaws, just no ego, hard worker, salt of the earth. I always said, he could have, he was, born and raised in Louisiana, and he'd have fit right in Southern Indiana too. Just the best guy. I tell you what, that was a little tough for me yesterday because, I could say just one of the all-time greats as a player, and certainly one of the all-time greats in my mind as a man.
No question. What an era he played in. I know growing up, the Knicks were the thing, and Walt Frazier and Willis Reed were it in New York in that era. I mean, you had Joe Namath with the Jets, obviously, but the Knicks during that era were unbelievable. With DeBusschere and Bradley, and then a couple of years later, Earl Monroe to go with Frazier. But Wes Unseld against Willis Reed, those were some incredible matchups. Willis against Wilt. I mean, that was an era of bigs that were incredible. That was just so much fun to watch.
Yeah, and Willis kind of basically he played against Lou Alcindor at that time, later Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He kind of played at the end of Bill Russell's career, at the end of Wilt Chamberlain's. He played quite a bit more against Wilt, of course. But so he played against all the greats, and he was one of the greats. And as you mentioned, that New York Knicks team,
oh boy,
they were so much ahead of their time. Just the beauty of the game, the five-man offense, the ball always moving. It's kind of like today's three-point game with the Warriors have been, but they played the 20-foot game, where you didn't have the three-point shot, but that ball moved and everybody was a good perimeter shooter.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the Kings. I made this comment before the game started last night. The league is talking about, no 4 and 5s, cutting back-to-backs. They're scheduling games in the same city where you play the team twice. We've seen it several times this year where the Kings have been in Minnesota, in Oklahoma City. We've seen Denver come in and play on back-to-back nights. We've seen Dallas come in and have 2 games in a row. So they're trying to cut down on travel. But what the Kings just went through to me is absurd. Last night was their 5th game in 7 nights in 4 different time zones. They came off their 4-game road trip, and the next night they have the Celtics, who had been off since Saturday. They'd had, it just made no sense to me, Jerry. I mean, I know you are old-fashioned, and I get that in terms of don't complain about the schedule because everybody plays 41 at home and 41 on the road, and every team, Jerry, can look at the schedule during certain times of the year and go, wow, we got screwed. I don't know if the Kings would have beat the Celtics anyway last night, Jerry, but they had no chance based on their schedule. That's how I looked at that game.
Don't disagree. I mean, I always said it's true. There's 41 home, 41 on the road, and I've always said too, the schedule will win you some games because you're going to catch teams like that.
Yep.
And it'll lose you games, and that's the sad part of it. It's the same for everybody where you're,
yep.
It just isn't giving the fans the best product. So any way they can, to me, it's like if you can play teams, same team 2 games in at the same spot, like they're doing more of. I think that's a great idea.
I do too.
To cut down on that, city to city, and especially going east to west or west to east. It doesn't make any difference. And, we saw no question a sluggish team against the Jazz and then a worn out team in the second half against the Celtics. And I'm with you. Celtics are better than the Kings, period.
Yes.
But they got a tired team.
Jerry, they're only, I would say, I'm gonna add a third team to this, but this says something. And Ryan and I were talking about this yesterday. There are only, I'm gonna say 4 teams, and it might even be 3 in the league that I can definitively say are no ifs, ands, or buts about it better than the Kings. One is Milwaukee, one is Boston. I think because of the matchup, I think the Kings would have a really troubled time beating Philadelphia because of Embiid. And then the other team is Denver, and I'm not even so sure about Denver anymore because they're not playing well. Other than that, I don't see a team in the league that the Kings could not beat in a playoff series or make it very, very compelling.
I totally agree. I've said that myself. I mean, to me, it's those 3. And they're all in the East, and you wouldn't have, and whoever comes out of the East is going to be beat up. Now, I don't know who that will be. I kind of think Milwaukee's maybe they got the edge because they've got the best player.
Yep.
And that's always an edge, and they've won a championship. So but having said that, that's why somebody that comes out of the West, even though I don't think anybody's as good, they're going to be in better shape to compete against whoever comes out of the West. But to your point, there's no reason for the Kings to fear anybody in the West. Not any reason at all.
Garrett says, the Suns with KD. Well, we haven't seen the Suns with KD other than 3 games, and we don't know if he's even coming back. And, I mean, he's coming back. We don't even know to what degree. So I'm not even including them in there right now. Now, if you told me that Kevin Durant was healthy, I would agree with you. I would think the Suns are better. But how about the injuries? Paul George gets hurt again last night. He's going to be reevaluated in a couple of weeks. I mean, that is a huge blow to the Clippers. Zion Williamson's been cleared for basketball activities. They could have him back in 2 weeks. Karl Anthony Towns may be back tonight. John Moran's coming back. So the things are changing constantly in the West because of really good players that are either hurt or getting ready to come back.
Yeah, who do you know for sure is going to play? And I'm like you. I mean, if Durant is totally healthy and has fit in with the team, yeah, I think they're the team you'd be scared of all the teams. But hey, he got hurt shooting around by himself.
That's right.
So why are you going to count on him being able to stay healthy through an entire playoff series or the end of the year? And as you said, about the time you think the Clippers may be starting to put it together, Paul George goes out.
That's right.
So, I mean, knock on wood here, but of course the Kings have been the healthiest team in the league all year. And that,
yep.
Certainly lost guys, Herter a few games, Fox a few games, things like that. But they've been really great there. And of course, they're lucky. They have one guy who actually plays hurt. The old saying, you can't play injured, but you can play hurt. And
right.
Sabonis is he's an old school in that regard.
Again, what about a healthy this, healthy this, healthy? None of those teams have been healthy all year. Why would I think that all of a sudden I'm going to wake up in the morning and they're all going to be healthy? So, yeah, obviously, if the Lakers were healthy, obviously I would pick them to beat the Kings in a series. If the Warriors had their full complement of players, but why would I think that the Warriors are going to have their full complement of players? They haven't had it all year. We don't know about Andrew Wiggins. The Clippers are they're not going to be healthy. I mean, I don't know about you, but Paul George doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon. So, again, none of those teams have been healthy. Why would I think they're going to be healthy now? The point that Jerry and I are trying to make is that this West is completely up for grabs. So, Jerry, I want to get to this. How does Karl Anthony Towns, because when he was on the floor with Gobert and that new look team, they weren't that impressive. So why would I think that Towns is going to come back and he's just going to all of a sudden be invincible? I don't see that.
I don't either. They really didn't fit very well when he played the games he did until they got hurt. Yep. And they've certainly been playing very well of late. But of course, we also remember Anthony Edwards is hurt.
That's right.
Really, who's their best player? And I mean, if in fact Towns could come in and provide something, not even all-star quality play, if he could provide something, I think the Connolly addition, and if Edwards gets healthy before the play, yeah, they could be tough to beat, but too many buts. I
The
mean,
whole
you're
West
saying,
is
yeah,
the whole Western Conference is a butt right now. The entire
yeah.
conference. And I'm going to include Denver in there because they're not playing well at all. I mean, name me a team, and I'm going to give you one team, but I want to name who's the team in the West right now that you're like everything is solidified and everything is just rolling around. You know who that team is for me right now, other than the Kings? It's Oklahoma City. Do not take your eye off the Thunder, Jerry.
Well, they've got, they give you a good effort every night. They've got certainly one of the very best players in the league in Gilgeous Alexander. I mean, he's really an unguardable product. And then Josh Giddey is just a kind of a Tyrese Halliburton type young player. I mean, really just makes players better around him and well coached. They absolutely, and they've gotten better. They're just like you said. I mean, that's a team that 3 months ago wasn't as good as they are now. And so you'd have to be pretty concerned about them, I think.
All right, games tonight that could affect things in the West. You got Memphis. John Morant is back. Phoenix is without DeAndre Ayton. Of course, we know about Kevin Durant. And again, Phoenix comes into Sacramento on Friday, so you don't really know about that. Utah hosts Portland. Minnesota is home to Atlanta. And so the Warriors are in Dallas. That's another team, the Mavs. Doesn't look like it's working to me, Jerry.
Well, I've said, on one of the other podcasts I do, they talking about teams you'd like to, who you'd prefer to play in the first round. And I said the Mavericks, because I think they're the least talented team. And certainly it doesn't, there's no doubt that Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic are major talents, but they almost overlap to where neither one are as good as they could be because of the other. It's not, and I don't think they're trying, but they do the same things. You don't need, in other words, like Kyrie Irving is more talented than Jalen Brunson, but Jalen Brunson he's a better player really for that team, just like he is for the Knicks. So that's who I wish the Kings could get in the playoffs if they get there, because I just think once you look at that roster, the Kings have a better roster.
And then you have the Kings who play Phoenix on Friday, then the Jazz, and then Minnesota. So again, be ready to play. The Jazz, to me, are an interesting team for this reason. We always talk about matchups. It's not always, gee, who's the better team? It's who do you match up well against and who do you not match up well against? Do you know that the Jazz and the Kings, before the loss the other night in Salt Lake City, the previous two games had come down to the final possession, okay? And then the game the other night was 128-120, but the game was much closer than the score indicated. With 30 seconds to go, that game was up for grabs. And again, I'm well aware that Laurie Markkinen did not play and Colin Sexton didn't play and Clarkson. I get all of that. But matchups, Jerry. So you look at not only the record of a team in the year, but you look at matchups. That is a big factor. Like we talk about Philadelphia. Okay, well, record-wise, Philadelphia is not that much better than Sacramento, but matchup-wise, they are, because the Kings they don't have anyone at all that can stay on the floor with Joel Embiid.
No, it really that's always been the case with the NBA to a degree. Now I'll throw something into the Jazz equation, and I think it's probably more important than anything else. The Jazz play a great zone, and the Kings did not play well against it, nearly as well, as they have or could. But
why is that? Why is it that the Kings struggle against the zone?
Because it's so important for Sabonis to have the ball and get movement and set screens and all that, and it's so easy to switch all that, and then Sabonis even has to come out a little higher sometime to get that first entry pass, and I think it affected him. And you look at the numbers with Sabonis in that game, probably worst game of his since he's been here.
Yes.
And I really think the zone was the reason. And the Kings had a tough time playing against a really good zone with Toronto a month or so ago. And because the strength of their this offense for the Kings is ball movement and really possessions by Sabonis, because he's your triple double guy. And
Yep.
so, and I think that's anyway, that's why. But I mean, I like their talent, by the way, and even without those three guys who are probably the three best players, but Danny Ainge, as usual, picked up Kendrick Nunn, who's a player, was a 5th round pick or number 5 pick when he came out. I think Chicago drafted him. I was going to say, boy, Chicago, they've given up on guys a little too soon.
They sure have. They
Patience
sure have.
is a virtue. That's why I always tell people they'll question Keegan Murray, and I said, don't you question that guy.
That's right.
That guy is about 3 years from now, you'll be really sorry if you let him go.
Cody, you're talking about matchups in the first round. Those teams may not even be in the playoffs. We need to understand that if you look at the Clippers, they have 35 losses. They're currently in 5th. The 11th place team right now is the Lakers. They have 37 losses. We're talking about 2 losses different in the column. So if you're the Clippers now, and you're going to be without Paul George in all likelihood for the rest of the regular season, and who knows the playoffs, you may not even make the playoffs. So I instead of saying, and Cody, I know where you're coming from on this, but these teams that we're talking about may not even be in the playoffs. Dallas is 1 game, okay? Dallas is 1 game from not being in the playoffs. 1 game. Think about that.
Yeah, there's just too much balance especially at the lower reign. And I mean, and don't know for sure about how the Kings will finish. I think they've got a great chance to finish 3rd still, but
they will.
At the end of it, the only 3 teams that are, in my mind, are dead in the water are certainly San Antonio, Houston, and Portland.
I agree.
Portland's dead in the water. I don't think they're going anywhere. I wonder if they kind of wish they had Terry Stotts back. Oh boy,
right? And then you got Zion Williamson, who is again, they think 2 weeks from coming back, but with him, you never know. All right, I want to bring Ryan in Sacktown. Ryan, again, we keep on talking about who the Kings may or may not play. The reality is, other than Phoenix, which, to me, with 38 and 33, they're going to be in the playoffs. But who knows if the Clippers are going to be in now, right? I mean, the Warriors can't win on the road. They're playing in Dallas tonight. Oklahoma City's on a roll. They've won 8 of 10. Dallas without Luka. You got Minnesota. All of these teams could be out of the playoffs.
Grant, you bring up an excellent point. I mean, the Kings, they've pretty much solidified they will be in, but this is going to be really fun to watch, especially with how the West has been, like the two of you have talked about. And you look at the group of the teams, it could be anybody from 5 to 11 right now.
By the way, today was a hat day. You didn't get the memo, did you?
No, I didn't. I did my hair before you guys threw the hats on. My bad.
Yeah, when you do your hair, that can be a real obstacle. So I'll give you a pass there since you did your hair and, you don't want to put a hat on it. Jerry knows what that's like. Jerry very often will do his hair before a game.
I was going to shave for you guys, and I realized, I don't like a beard and I don't like to shave. So that's a conundrum. So I said, hell, I'll just not do anything.
Conundrum's a big word for you.
It is a big word, and I just really learned what it meant about a week ago.
Now we got a hat on. See, look at that.
There we go.
There you go. There you go. Now you're a player.
Put me in the game, coach.
All right. So back to the Kings for a moment. 43 and 29, 10 games left. These next 3 games, again, Phoenix, we don't know if DeAndre Ayton's going to be on the floor, but we do know that when the Kings and the Suns play, it's been pretty entertaining. Then you have the Jazz coming in, who, again, I think it's a toss-up type of a game. And then if Karl Anthony Towns is on the floor, meaning if everything goes well, as he's back tonight, let's see how Minnesota looks. I'm very curious, Jerry, to see how that's going to come together. Ryan, I'm sure you are too. We'll start with you, Jerry. But again, we don't know. That's a question mark.
Well, I think for me, the biggest question is when Anthony Edwards comes back. I think he's their most valuable player. He's the biggest matchup problem for the Kings or anybody else for that matter. Karl Anthony Towns a heck of a talent, but Edwards is a guy that's toughest to match up with, and he's probably going to be out for a while. So we'll see. I think it's probably, if you're the Timberwolves, you're glad to have Towns back, but there's a lot of questions to be answered.
So Jerry, that's an interesting point because we were talking about matchups. Yeah, Edwards, unanimously is the hardest matchup on that team. But for the Kings, if Towns is back, I think Towns and Gobert are the hardest matchups because that's the position the Kings are the thinnest at. You have Sabonis, but then Metu has not shown the ability to really guard a bigger guy if he needs to. And Lynn, has not played well in minutes, and Rashawn's not playing it much at all either. So that could cause trouble for Sacramento.
Oh, I think it could. I think that's a great point, Ryan. I mean, if you let the game get to be a 5-on-5 half-court game, the Kings are in real trouble. But it's also true if you're as the Kings, if you're Minnesota, if the Kings want to get you out and really have pressure and pace, then they've got a problem. Because you don't want to play any situations where it's 5-on-5, and certainly Towns and Gobert are going to have a tough time matching up with the Kings bigs as well. Whether if you call Harrison Barnes a big or certainly Domas. So I think that's the interesting question to me is what kind of game is it? If which team can impose their will? If the T-Wolves can make it a 5-on-5 half-court game, they'll probably win the game. And if it's an up and down high scoring game, then the Kings are going to win.
Jerry, do you believe in momentum that at the end of a season for teams that are going into the playoffs? I mean, I do. I think it's important that you're playing well heading into the playoffs. I mean, especially for a team like Sacramento, who has not been there in such a long time. Now, obviously, they have guys that play on their team that have been in the playoffs, Harrison Barnes. There are guys, but are you a believer in that momentum? You think it's important?
Yeah, I mean, momentum. I'd even say confidence. It's one of those things that you want to go into tough situations. I always say it's like they talk about golfers, when they're playing well going into a tournament, or they win, or they haven't played well and they play well, and they say, "Oh yeah, now it really helps my confidence going forward." And there's a lot to be said for that. So you want to, it's not to say you can't turn it around, and confidence, momentum is something can be turned around in 2 games either way. But you damn sure want to go into the playoffs feeling like you're healthy and you're playing very well. And so that especially when it's going to be as close as it is in the West.
This is interesting. Adrian Wojnarowski had reported that John Morant's coming off the bench tonight. I'm surprised that this doesn't happen with more players that are out for a period of time. We saw Tim Duncan when he was out for a long period of time, came back and Pop had him coming off the bench. And I think that says a lot about a player. I mean, we talk so much about this when Chris Webber came back, after he had microfracture surgery on the game on March 2nd. And there was no way you could have ever had Chris coming off the bench. I mean, people say, well, Rick Adelman should have brought Chris off the bench. Chris probably would have refused to play. I like it when a player, and first of all, it shouldn't be up to the player. It should never be up to the player. That's what you have a coach for. Should be the coach's decision. But I'm all for that. Especially Memphis has been playing pretty well lately. Bring him off the bench until he's ready to go full tilt, Jerry.
And to his credit, I think he's even said that he'd be willing to do that. And that's to me, that's a very nice step on his part.
Yep.
And I mean, they're a good team without him, but they need him to be at their best. And I think that would be the way to go for a few games. Certainly. Just let him adjust to coming off the bench, getting his legs. And, I'd say the same thing about Karl Anthony Towns, or Zion Williamson. I mean, These guys, boy, they haven't played in so long. Why would you think they're ready just to start and be at their best? I mean, it's like you pointed out with Weber, and it's really true. He really wasn't ready to be a full-time starter, but, he almost had to plug him in there because he might, I know he wouldn't have liked it and been an unhappy camper. But so yeah, that's what I agree with you 1,000%. That's a coaching decision. And if a guy really is looking out for best interest of the team, he should be able to understand that we want to bring you along so that the team can play at its best.
All right, here's an interesting question regarding Harrison Barnes and whether he will be on the team next year. Now, I answered this question a couple of weeks ago, and I said, worry about it in the summer. Don't worry about it now because the Kings are going to be in the playoffs. Those things will take care of themselves. But it is an interesting question, and we have this little round table that we can talk. I personally feel the guy is so underappreciated in Sacramento. I think he does so much for this team. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. Look into your crystal ball. Do you think Harrison Barnes is on this team next year?
Great question, Grant. I'm going to say it really depends on what the market looks like free agency wise and who's available. So that's the only caveat to that. But with that said, yes, I do think he is. And I think the playoffs have no bearing on whether or not Harrison would be brought back. He has already solidified his place with this organization and this team in that role. And it is so important to them. And he's a bona fide champion and a big part of what they've done this year.
Jerry, what do you think?
Well, I mean, he's one of the guys that does have playoff experience and has played on a champion. And, he and Domas and Herter are the guys that have played in quite a few playoff games. And I'll just say that my stance on Harrison has been all year. I didn't know that he would be able to maintain it, but he's the third best player on this team. And certainly it applies to anybody. Hey, if you can get somebody better than Harrison going forward, of course you do it. You make that judgment. It's been my contention. I don't know that you can. I just, and especially when you think in terms of how well he fits in, with the current team. He can go a half and take 2 shots, or if you need him to score, he can get 20 and a half. And I mean, he really isn't a selfish bone in his body. No. And then maybe even more importantly, he doesn't miss games. He doesn't miss games. He's out there. He's available.
To me, he does so much for this team. He's such a professional. I mean, the guy is all about the team. He's not a me guy. As you said, if he's scoring, he's fine. If he's not scoring and he's doing other things, he's fine. That's what I love about Sabonis. I was talking about this with Ryan the other day. I like the fact that at least from outside looking in, and you and I, Jerry, we know a lot of the players that are currently playing on the team because we were around them so often. There's not that look at me type of a guy, oh, I'm better than you are. You know what I mean? There aren't, I call them stat sheet guys where they run into the locker room and the first thing they do is they look at their numbers. This team doesn't have that. And I think it's so refreshing to see this is truly a team. And I know winning helps that, but there aren't those guys that are a lot of work, meaning that they carry a lot of baggage with them, that you have to babysit them all the time and you have to be different with them and kid gloves and all this other crap. The Kings don't have that. I think that's very refreshing.
I have not seen a team in the Kings era, or Kansas City Kings for that matter, that had this good a chemistry. Mm-hmm. Certainly I've seen teams more talented, but they are truly unselfish. And I think it primarily comes from the coach, Sabonis, and Fox and Barnes. Because if you couldn't get all those people to buy in, and you see it in so many ways. I've always said that the biggest flaw in Domas's game, he's too unselfish at times. He turns down shots, and he also makes a turnover a game that he shouldn't because he's looking for somebody other than himself. And if you're going to have a flaw, that's a good one to have. And then you see it with Fox, he's more than happy to just play along as things are going good, to play along with the team, with the game. And if you need him to go get a bunch of points, when it gets tough for guys can't get shots, he can. And he's done that. And then, of course, like say, Barnes is Mr. Fix-It. Plug him in here, plug him in there. And then anyway, it's been so much fun to watch, and it's because of that, the total unselfishness of this team. And when your top guys are unselfish, it's pretty hard for the secondary guys to be.
I had a conversation on our Listen App show yesterday, and someone asked me where I would rank Sabonis, in the Kings era, not before Sacramento, but the Sacramento era. And I thought about it, and I said, I'd probably put him number 1. And the reason why I would put him number 1 is he is a remarkably gifted player. You know what you're going to get from him every single night. He's unbelievably consistent. He's a tremendous passer. He rebounds, he scores. He pretty much does everything, and he doesn't need to be fed. In other words, you don't have to worry about his ego. You don't have to worry about kissing his ass. You don't have to worry about him doing anything stupid or wrong. Had there been more talented bigs? Yeah. Chris Webber's more talented than Sabonis. DeMarcus Cousins' skill set was more talented. But, DeMarcus, we don't even have to get into. But with Chris, as good as Chris was, Chris had a different set of rules pretty much with the team. And Chris was well-liked by his teammates, but Chris was Chris. And you always had to deal with Chris being Chris. And you don't have to worry about that with that Domantas. And, Jerry, that's why I put him number 1 on my list.
Well, I'll tell you something. I've done that. Same reason. He's certainly not the most talented, but he's the most productive and really the most valuable because of some of the things you said. And like I say, Chris Webber's definitely more talented. But
yes.
I think, the thing that's probably different a little bit. Chris was the number 1 high school player in the nation, the number 1 draft choice. It's a different dynamic. Domas grew up with a dad who had been one of the truly great big men in the history of the game,
Yep.
and just probably was tamped down a little bit. That the old man probably could say, even though he was highly recruited, but nobody thought he would be, what he is today. And I think he just felt and you see it, that he has to prove something all the time. And as much as I say, go back to Chris, I've always said, as great as Chris was, Vlade Divac had a lot to do with keeping Chris on the right path.
Oh boy!
Vlade was the real leader of that team.
Yes, he was.
And I think probably if you look at the real leader of this team, is Domas, and certainly Cousins was never the real leader of his team.
No, you make a great point about Vlade and Ryan. The perspective that Jerry and I have of being around that team every day. Vlade was the glue on that team. I mean, I don't think the Kings would have enjoyed the success that they had without Vlade. And Vlade was perfect for Chris. Chris respected Vlade, and Vlade was able to reel Chris in when he needed to be reeled in, and he needed to be reeled in at times. And Vlade was able to keep the locker room very harmonious and keep everything together. He had a knack for being able to do that, Ryan. So I know a lot of people seem to gloss over that. You can't gloss over that. That stuff's really important.
Yeah, it is. And Domas is doing that in his own way. I mean, the fact that he was able to play through the injury to his hand, that sets a tone in that locker room for the rest of the guys. That sets a precedent that you're going to come to this level and I'm going to, we're all going to sacrifice. And he's kind of the glue for the team in that way. I mean, it's a toughness, and that's what a team needs to have to be successful. So Domas is special in many ways that Chris was not, and Vlade was not.
Yeah.
Well,
Jerry, I want to get back
on that too.
Go ahead.
I think it's easier for a guy like Domas, for the players to listen to Domas as a leader because they know he is totally unselfish.
Yeah.
He's getting them shots. And now you see Monk and Herter and different guys, they really look to get him shots. Get him, that's the way it works. Unselfishness spreads. Just like selfishness spreads.
Jerry, you made an interesting comment earlier in the show about the Jazz and why they're effective, and it's because of how they're playing the zone. This is the NBA. We got the greatest players in the league every night on courts from coast to coast. So a fan might be asking, well, why can't they be better against the zone? What would it take for the Kings to be more effective against the zone? I know you touched on it a little bit, but why is it such a problem? Why can't that be fixed in practice?
Well, I think it could to a degree. I mean, I think it's there going to have to be some adjustments in what they want to do offensively, and I think that's always a problem when you're playing 90% of your games a certain way, and all of a sudden you need to play a little different way. And like against the zone, you're not going to get the same takes to the basket and things of that nature. I've always said to, try to get the ball by pass to the high post and then break it down from there. If you get two quick passes out of the high post will break a zone down, and where you could even drive it. But the Kings, in my mind, they're still trying to kind of play the same offense that they play against man, and certainly they can score. Certainly in transition, it would have no effect. And so the zone is only going to be effective when they can get it set. Uh, but that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to do a little more of the try to beat the zone by getting the ball to the middle via, whether you can do it by dribble or by pass, but you got to get it there to break it down.
Jerry, here's the other thing too. With the zone, once you get the ball in the middle, you have to be able to make a very quick decision. You can't sit there and hold the ball because they're going to collapse on you. And while Sabonis is a great decision maker, he's not a quick decision maker. And I think that's something that causes a little bit of issues when the ball comes to him in the zone. And then the other thing with the Kings and the 3-point shooting, you look at the starters, most of them, Keegan Murray, perfect example, they get set up for their shots. In a zone, you're not going to be completely set. You're going to be constantly moving around the arc if you're swinging the ball. And so it's kind of not a natural movement for them, like you said earlier about the zone.
Yeah, with a man, you can always tell if your man is kind of bit on a drive and helping out, and so you get to the open area. Well, in the zone, the guy isn't necessarily going to do that. He's going to stay in his zone, and so. But you made the right point there, Ryan. That's what hurts Domas, because he wants to make the right play. Well, the right play is moving the ball. Mm-hmm. There really isn't a play at that point. Now, if it's kicked out and then later on kicked back in, that's different. But that first when it hits him or whoever's in the high post, and you might even, in my mind, I would almost like to see Harrison Barnes pop in there and just to get the ball moving and then play out of that. But once the ball's there, if you don't move it, then the zone just matches up.
Great point, guys. Interesting conversation. Final thing before we say goodbye. All right, so now you have lost 2 in a row. It's been a while since we've talked about the Kings losing consecutive games. You have Phoenix coming in that, has played Sacramento very tough. Phoenix right now is kind of up and down. I think they were so gelling with Durant. And then once he got down, it was like, oh my gosh, here we go again. They're only 5-5 in their last 10. But we don't know if DeAndre Ayton's playing on Friday. He's not playing tonight. But you have the next 3 games, Phoenix, Utah, and Minnesota, and all of those teams are more than capable of beating Sacramento. So I think Friday, guys, stop the bleeding a little bit. I'm not worried about the Kings falling out of the 3rd spot, but you do not want a trend going south right now. I think Friday's game is very, very important for this Kings team.
Well, I do too, and I agree. I mean, and all these wins are hard because, like you pointed out, these teams are all not just about the Kings. They're fighting for their playoff life.
Yep.
And so you're going to get their best games. You're going to get playoff atmosphere. Kings know that. And so, but it's going to be tough. I mean, they're going to have to play really well. Fortunately, at least they'll have a chance to come out with some fresh legs because they were just beat up last night.
They had no chance. Ryan, 10 games left. 10 games left.
Hard to believe, partner. It's going to be a fun end of the season, but this is, to me, the most critical stretch of those 10 games because, like you said, it could go very, very quick with the teams that they have coming in and they're going to see. So, and you made a great point, Grant, about Utah. They have played the Kings tough all year. The 3 points in the first 2 games differential. So, it'll be fun.
Jerry, you have a good week. We'll talk to you next week. Looking forward to it already.
We got a little sunlight here. I may get out there and kind of listen to little Rolling Stones and get moving.
There you go.
All right, Jerry, take care.
See you guys.
Thank you, Jerry.
And then Ryan, we'll be doing the shows coming up on Friday. You'll do the pregame, and you'll be with me on halftime and postgame. And I think that is a really big game for the reason if you lose that, now you've lost 3 in a row, and you got a team that gives you fits coming in right after that Jazz, and then you got Cat. And by then, I think Anthony Edwards will be back. He's even officially listed as questionable for tonight. So that could be a whole different animal with the Timberwolves coming in.
Yes, it could. Timberwolves, again, a team that's played them tough without Cat. And so it will be interesting, but Friday night is very important in the first step to kind of stopping that bleeding.
Yeah, the Phoenix Suns, as we said, are in LA tonight, and they are taking on the Lakers, and then they'll be here on Friday. So, DeAndre Ayton, we don't know about Friday. He's got a hip injury, but he is not playing tonight. All right, Ryan, we'll talk to you on Friday, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Grant.
All right, good stuff there from Ryan. And want to tell you that we are thankful for New Works Plumbing of Sacramento. Locally owned for over 20 years, New Works has a fix for you. Just go to sacserviceplumbing.com or call the number on your screen. New Works Plumbing, they've got a fix for you. Thanks for joining us here on the stream. Don't forget to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and we will have you here again on Friday. Can't wait for that. So long, everybody.